and innovative behaviors in healthcare. We discussed extensively in week 1 that this particular course is not just memorizing it, reading it, and then regurgitating what we have memorized into this program. This is going to be like a foundational program where we look constructively on different aspects of leadership. We realize that there are 16 comprehensive centers or 16 competency centers that has been consolidated for our study under 4 major domains, starting with cultivated self-awareness, with leading with conviction, and using emotional intelligence. Those would be the discussion topic for today, which is the first and second competencies from this domain. Then we would jump into series of competencies coming from compelling vision, followed by a real way with people, connecting with people, building that transparency, trust, then moving into the masterful execution on how we are going to deliver. And all of these are completely grounded in the self-concept. So competency 1, leading with conviction, as the word says, having clarity of purpose, standing firm in values, and inspiring others to consistent action. Competency 2 is how do we leverage emotional intelligence? And first, in order for that to become practical, one needs to recognize and manage our own emotions while we are understanding and influencing the emotion of others. So always remember, if we are engaged in a discussion, you maintain the authentic way of driving that discussion only if you're grounded in your own emotions and you have the capability of recognizing and managing that emotions. So when you bring conviction and emotional intelligence, that builds the foundation for well-cultivated self-awareness. So self-awareness, as we discussed in the last lecture, it's the heart of leadership. Why? Because it ties conviction to emotional intelligence. It helps leaders act with integrity. It helps align the decision-making with values, and it remains grounded even under pressure. So St. Nicholas case study, as well as other discussions in the textbook, will clearly bring to you the nature of the nature of the leadership that is needed within a healthcare perspective, and how it is important to understand that you have a position and how do you communicate that well-informed position that you have is rooted by your values, facts, leadership principles, and the scope and directionality of the enterprise or the hospital or health system that you're leading, and how will you remain grounded even under pressure. So, and that self-awareness, there is a reason why it is called as well-cultivated self-awareness rather than just saying self-awareness. Now, that will drive the compelling vision. And the compelling vision will enable you to have, so let's take from the beginning. Once you build your conviction, meaning you're grounded with your principles, with your belief systems, with the directionality of the institution, and alignment to the values, as well as your strong, emotionally intelligent professional. When you have that leadership competency center mastered, that will drive for you to bring together a vision because that vision then would be coming from leaders who understand themselves, and they will be able to communicate with purpose more clearly. Now, once you are able to communicate your purpose, your vision more clearly, then it enables a real way with people, since emotionally intelligent leaders build trust and meaningful relationships. And once that connection with people happens, then it would strengthen masterful execution or masterful delivery, as leaders who are self-aware regulate their bias, stay focused on what matters most. Now, if you don't have mastery over the three previous domains and you jump into a project management or a program management, and you have a large project or program to manage with multiple stakeholders, you can check yourself on how you are responding without nobody else knowing, how you are responding to questions, comments, feedback coming from different individuals in your project, who would have an agenda, who would not have an agenda, who wants to support your project, who wants to destroy your project, who wants to come up with different ways by which the project can be led, and how you're responding to all of those different scenarios. So, week 2 is probably the most foundational learning paradigm in all these 8 weeks, because week 2 is about connecting the internal. What you believe and feel, and how do you respond to the external? How you would lead and engage others. This balance that you need to build and manage is what makes leadership journey authentic, effective, and enjoyable. I've seen many people, I've seen many leaders. When I started my career in project management, it was very tough, because in my mind, I have a roadmap on how this particular project needs to be delivered or executed, which I collected from my leadership, who has given me a strict roadmap. But the moment I come to my team, a team of 20, 30 people, the more problematic. And share this roadmap, there will be opinions, there will be recommendations, there will be suggestions, some even questioning the purpose of this project, some telling me that these kinds of projects have been executed many times in this company and it has never been successful. So finally, if you are not rooted within the conviction and emotional intelligence, as a project manager, it will be like a nightmare. When you go through the school and study the project management, it's as simple, as straightforward. Everything will make perfect sense. I'm an adjunct faculty for project management too. And when I teach project management, that's the easiest course. But when you put project management into practice, that becomes the most challenging journey, unless and until you are a solid leader rooted in conviction and emotional intelligence. Now, even if you are a solid leader, you still will go through learning curve. But that learning curve will not cripple you, will not create pain internally. Some of you are very good in masking the pain, but internally, when you go home or when you are in your quiet place, when you connect with yourself, it's bruises and pain all over the place. You just cannot see it. Your ego has been bruised in different directions. So some would realize it, some would not realize it. So it's very, very important that you stay grounded with what is being taught in this competency, and you intentionally look deeper within yourself and you build those principles into how effectively you can drive leadership, leveraging the lessons that we are learning from competency 1. The subtitle exactly it says it's lead with the purpose and inspire with integrity. Now, let me move my picture from here because it might block the the slides. Okay. So competency one, leading with conviction. So as I mentioned, week two is all about connecting with the internal. So let's start with several examples. I mean, most of my slides are very straightforward, easily readable slides. But more importantly, this lecture, I believe, should all be about examples. There are so many inspiring leaders that can guide us, what they went through, their journey. So reading even outside the class, autobiography of key leaders who has influenced this world both positively and negatively will give us more insights into how we can build our leadership portfolio consciously rather than organically, or rather than how situations would force us into a leader. We would be receiving the opportunity to build it consciously. So, this great global leader, Nelson Mandela, everyone has heard about his story. He was imprisoned in South Africa for, I believe, 27 plus years because he wanted to fight against a brutal system of racial segregation. So imagine nearly 3 decades behind bars, cut off from family, cut off from community, cut off from the world. I would probably lose hope. I would probably give in. And that's it. And probably that's how most people would be. But stories from Nelson Mandela, who never abandoned his conviction, his deep belief that South Africa could be a nation of equality and justice. So he strongly believed in that conviction. So even in prison, he studied, he listened, and he built relationships rather than brooding over why the community, why the society, why the law, why the public has given what he is suffering at that point of time. So he used the prison time to strengthen his vision rather than to let it fade. I shared regarding my startup. When I couldn't sleep because there is a gap between physicians and patients, where patients are not following the instructions or cannot even comprehend the instructions provided by physicians, my deep rooting started to form the conviction. My conviction that physicians and patients should be seamlessly connected so that patient can have a successful recovery journey when they go home from the hospital. In the hospital, they are taken care. When they leave hospital, everything is chaos. So when Nelson Mandela was finally released, people followed him, not just because he was free, but because he has proven through all these years that his conviction was unshakable. He didn't return with bitterness. He didn't guide people in a wrong way. He returned with commitment to his reconciliation. That conviction became the moral foundation for dismantling the inequality, the injustice, and building a new South Africa. So that conviction, as we discussed, can give rise to the vision of a new South Africa. That's where his vision was born. How South Africa can become one of the emerging um, continent nation, and how they can show to the world equality and justice, opportunities for all will build itself as a new paradigm for humanity. So Mandela's story shows us why conviction matters in leadership. It builds credibility. It gives people something to believe. And it demonstrates that leadership is not just about holding a position of power. It's about holding on to your principles even when it costs everything. Now, let's take another example. Starbucks. Howard shows when we were in the middle of an economic downturn, Starbucks insisted keeping healthcare benefits for all employees, including part-time employees. And that decision is very costly because economic downturn is happening, revenues are coming down, many Starbucks stores are being shut down. But the CEO's conviction was rooted in valuing people, taking care of them. So he balanced the business pragmatism with conviction, and it paid off in loyalty and performance. So this is something where conviction is applied effectively. Now, there is also on the other side, if the convictions go unchecked, if the convictions are without the safeguards. Some of you might have heard about this company called Theranos. Theranos came out as a very prominent healthcare company who would completely change healthcare. The founder of Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, she had a strong conviction that she could revolutionize blood testing. She claimed that her technology could run hundreds of tests from a single drop of blood, which means it's fast, it is cheap, it's accessible to everyone. Truly, it's an inspiring vision. You never know, it will happen in the future. So she convinced most powerful investors and leaders, and she realized millions and millions of dollars. There's nothing wrong with that. So what was the problem? The problem was her statements from the capabilities of the technology never worked. The technology was not rooted in clinical trials, in experimentations, in understanding how this worked with different groups of people without raising a lot of money. But she was so committed to her vision, she got wrapped up in her conviction that instead of slowing down and testing the science carefully, she went ahead. She ignored all of the findings. She ignored experts who raised concerns. She silenced employees who spoke up. She misled investors and patients. So in the end, the result is so obvious. The company collapsed and Holmes was convicted of fraud. So what started as conviction in a powerful idea soon became a deception because there were no safeguards, no accountability, no openness to feedback, no willingness to face the uncomfortable truths. So that's the dark side of the conviction. So if passion becomes a blind faith, the leaders stop listening and convictions can do real harm. So it's very important that you need to be completely grounded, because conviction is like fire in the hands of a wise leader like Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, all of those well-known leaders in the world. It provides the warmth, it provides the light, it provides the energy, it inspires people, it builds trust, and it moves organizations, it moves countries, it moves globe forward. So Nelson Mandela's and Mahatma Gandhi's and other people's conviction gave different kind of countries hope, whereas Howard's conviction, so similar to their conviction, Howard's conviction from an employer perspective, it built employees the loyalty and resilience. But in the case of Holmes, the fire can also burn. Conviction blinded her to truth and missed uh, opportunities, even for developing such kinds of technology. It definitely needs a period of baking, studying, clinical trials, publications, so that you could prove that, or you could have your conviction completely rooted with scientific facts. So convictions cannot stand alone. It must be anchored in values, balanced with humility, and safeguarded by system of accountability. When leaders pair conviction with listening, self-awareness, openness to feedback, conviction becomes not just powerful, but sustainable. So here is the lesson that I want you to carry forward. Conviction is the energy of leadership, but emotional intelligence and accountability are the guardrails. Without those guardrails, convictions can destroy not only you, but also even others. With them, with emotional intelligence and accountability, convictions can change the world. So now let's go to the next slide. What does it mean leading with conviction? So imagine joining a company and we feel that culture is stuck, right? I mean, we all have been in different parts of our professional life, either within the same company or a new company or a new department. People are competing with one another instead of collaborating, and innovations are completely stalled or not spoken, um, not spoken loud. That was, can you believe, Microsoft a little over a decade ago? Before Satya Nadella stepped in as a CEO, he was pretty much a victim of that culture. So he realized that he need to showcase conviction rooted in empathy and growth. He believed that if Microsoft could shift from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture, the company could thrive again. The difference between you know how to do it versus student. Somebody like a true professional without a learning mindset, whereas a student throughout your life. That was the difference that Satya Nadella brought to Microsoft. So, conviction in leadership, it means acting with clarity, acting with purpose, and deeply held values. Nadella's conviction was very clear. Innovation had to come from people feeling safe to experiment, feeling encouraged to collaborate, feeling inspired to grow. And he lived those values, not just in speeches, but how he listened to employees, how he encouraged vulnerability in leadership. So, this kind of conviction built trust and credibility. When people see their leader standing firmly for what matters, they believe that mission is more than just words. The credibility, or that particular credibility, creates alignment across the organization without you preaching about alignment. It becomes that you are walking the talk, the rest, everything will fall in place. It also inspires resilience. Teams facing uncertainty or setbacks can now push forward rather than worrying about punishments and discipline or performance reviews impacts and all of those things now can push forward when they know their leader's commitment is steady. So Nadella's conviction didn't waver, even if he wanted to make tough calls. It's like restructuring the teams or moving away from the old business models. And the result was Microsoft got transformed. The company regained its innovative edge. Imagine if Microsoft didn't move into the cloud space, Microsoft would be like a company that is done. So they moved very quickly into the cloud space. They built applications, their core, competent applications, adaptable to the cloud. They moved into machine learning, AI, and all of those augmentations, all because they shifted its culture and became one of the most valuable organizations in the world. All because Nadella led with conviction, anchored in empathy, clarity, and purpose. So when we ask, what is leading with conviction? It's not just about holding the strong beliefs, it's about holding them in a way that builds trust, in a way that inspires others, in a way it aligns the organization towards a shared mission. Now let's take a look at how highly effective leaders lead with conviction. So when we talk about effective leaders, conviction is not what they believe. It's how they live through those beliefs. Let's take a look at 4 different ways by which conviction shows up with some real world examples. So think about Mahatma Gandhi. His conviction was rooted in non-violence and truth. Even when facing an empire single-handedly, he never abandoned those principles. His ethical conviction didn't just guide him, it inspired very quickly a movement that led to India's independence. So leaders like Gandhi shows us that conviction in ethics creates moral authority. So in healthcare, I don't know how many of you have heard about Dr. Atul Gawande. He's a very strong example. His conviction in patient safety led him to champion what we call as surgical checklist. There are many surgeons resisted at first because they thought this surgical checklist will slow them down. But Dr. Atul's conviction in ethical responsibility that no patient should suffer from errors that can be prevented. Now, once you open the body, you will see so much things, and there are non-preventable errors. I mean, those are measures that surgeon has to take in order to save the bigger problem Thereby, he's creating smaller problems. But everything that he can prevent, he should completely prevent. And this surgical checklist saved countless lives. So that's conviction and ethics shaping the practice. Now, let's take a look at keeping the critics in mind. How do we listen, adapt, and hold the integrity? Abraham Lincoln is a powerful example here. He surrounded himself with people who often disagreed with him. What do? We run away from people who doesn't agree with us. They are no more our friends. Whereas leaders like Abraham Lincoln always kept them. So historians call him his team of rivals. So he welcomed dissenting voices, not to weaken his conviction, but to sharpen his decision, or I would say sharpen his decision as well-informed decision. Lincoln's conviction in preserving the Union never wavered. He was completely adamant in bringing the United States. But he adopted his approach by listening, which made him as a strong leader. Let's take another example, Dr. Paul Farmer. He is the co-founder of Partners in Health. So when critics said that it was impossible to deliver quality healthcare in the poorest part of the world. Why? Because the resources are not there. Dr. Farmer did not dismiss them. He listened to them. He adapted, and he proved that community-based models, that healthcare could reach the most vulnerable. His conviction in equity of care was unshakable, but he used critics to refine the solutions. Even in many companies today, they would have like risk management bodies who would bring the worst case scenarios, the medium case scenarios, best case scenarios, so that the companies would be able to bring the best product to the market or service to the market. Let's take a third one. How highly effective leaders lead with conviction, where consistency and maintaining values even when under pressure. So Rosa Parks is a perfect illustration. The story goes like, she was tired from a whole day work in Montgomery, Alabama. She's in a bus and she refused to give up her bus seat. It was just one act. It reflected her conviction in dignity and equality. It lived out even under immense personal risk. Many of you know the story. Her consistency sparked a movement that reshaped American history. From a business side, Johnson & Johnson, during the Tylenol crisis, it's a textbook example, literally. When tampered bottles led to deaths in 1982, Johnson & Johnson didn't hesitate to recall 31 million bottles. It's a massive financial hit. Their conviction in putting patients first, even under immense pressure, preserved trust and became a gold standard in crisis management. Let's take another one, inspiration. It's motivating others through authenticity. Authenticity is what makes convictions contagious. So Malala Yousafzai demonstrates this. Even after being attacked for speaking out girls' education, her conviction only grew stronger. And today, Her authenticity and courage inspire millions worldwide. People don't just admire her, they feel her conviction and it moves them to action. In healthcare, many of you know the US Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. He has inspired people with his conviction that loneliness is a public health crisis. At first, many dismissed the idea, but his authenticity, speaking openly about his own experiences, he motivated communities, he motivated organizations to address social connection as a serious healthcare issue. His conviction literally became a movement because it was real and personal. So, Starbucks would be another conviction in this example. So, Howard, his conviction that employees mattered, provide the necessary input for providing the healthcare benefits, even for part-time workers, irrespective of the economic challenge. When everybody said it was too costly, he moved forward with that decision. That single decision created loyalty, trust, and a culture that kept Starbucks strong even in tough times. His conviction turned a coffee chain into a global community. So when we look at ethical grounding coming from leaders like Gandhi, openness to critics like Lincoln, consistency under pressure like Rosa Parks, inspiration through authenticity like Malala, and practical conviction in business like Shows, you can see the pattern. Conviction is not a single act. It's a way of leading that builds trust, inspires resilience, and leaves a lasting impact. So now let's look at the other side of conviction. When will conviction become a risk? So as we explained in the early section, conviction is powerful, but without balancing it, we mentioned two guardrails, the emotional intelligence and accountability. Conviction can also drift into danger. So let's walk through some ways convictions can become risk. Number one is conflicted conviction. What does it mean? It means when your values clash with organizational needs. So sometimes you will come across a leader's personal conviction doesn't align with the organization. So let's take Dr. Oz in healthcare. He faced criticism for promoting treatments on TV that lacked scientific backing. His conviction in becoming a popular health voice conflicted with medical ethics, especially in terms of evidence-based approach or evidence-based practice. So when conviction clashes with organizational or professional values, the credibility that you have built all throughout that time will erode. Let's now look at lasting conviction, the stubbornness, ignoring of new evidence, and adapting and moving forward to achieve the purpose. So think about Blockbuster. Think about Blockbuster, think about Kodak, right? These are major corporations where leaders were so convinced that the physical DVD rentals or the traditional photography using film and developing the film, printing it and giving it, right, would always dominate, where they completely ignored the emerging of streaming capabilities or digital capabilities. So even when the evidence was clear, they were completely spreading the leadership message of what they believed was right. So while all of those was going on, Netflix, so in fact, I'm thinking Netflix came to partner with them early. They approached Blockbuster, and the Blockbuster leaders dismissed it. Even though Kodak filed a patent for the digital photography, and several of the leaders approached Kodak to see whether they can pioneer the digital side of the photography, they completely dismissed it. So the conviction in the old model became stubbornness and the company collapsed. Now let's take a look at disconnection, detaching from people or organizational realities. So in healthcare, hospital executives during COVID-19 sometimes fell into this trap. Some leaders were so focused on protecting the financial stability that they dismissed the frontline workers' cries for PPE and support. That disconnection from staff realities eroded the trust and in some places caused mass resignations. So convictions in keeping the hospital financially stable was important, but without connection to people, it backfired. The last one is overemphasis on personal gain, drifting from organizational mission. So we discussed Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. Her conviction in revolutionizing blood testing, it began as a visionary statement, but over time it shifted. The mission of affordability, accurate care got overshadowed by her personal conviction to be seen as the next Steve Jobs. When conviction serves ego over mission, the organization is always at risk. Eventually, it collapses. It hurts employees. It hurts patients if you're running a hospital system. And it hurts investors. So whether it's Dr. O's promoting an unproven treatment, Blockbuster, Kodak clinging to the past with the known past, healthcare executives disconnecting from frontline realities, or Elizabeth Holmes drifting from her mission, conviction without humility, without evidence and accountability doesn't just fail the leader, it fails the people and the society who depends on them. On a similar token, what would be the different ways of misuse and overuse when conviction backfires? So distracting others, conviction dominates the stifling perspectives. So think about Steve Jobs since we mentioned about Steve Jobs, in his early years at Apple, his conviction in product design and vision was legendary. But at times it became overwhelming for those who support him. He immediately dismissed others' ideas very harshly. At least that's what the literature is telling, and videos are telling, and movies are telling. I haven't seen that in action, so it is a third-party information. And it created fear instead of collaboration. When Jobs got his opportunity to develop into a matured leader and learned to channel his conviction more effectively, his early dominance often stifled voices and that could have added the value. The next one is failing to see beyond your own perspective, the tunnel vision. So in healthcare, Vioxx by Merck is an example. Leadership was so convicted that the drug was safe and revolutionary that they developed tunnel vision overlooking many evidences of risk. Their convictions blinded them. This is a very, very common example in the business world because the business world is running for profit. They believe no money, no margin, no mission, something like that. So their conviction would blind them, leading them to lawsuits, withdrawals, and reputational damage. The next one is rash judgments, very quick decision without collaboration. So WeWork's Adam Newman, I'm sure many of you already familiar with this case, that provides a clear case for this. His conviction that WeWork was more than an office rental company led him to make massive unilateral decisions, expanding too quickly, taking reckless risks. He did not care for collaboration or governance. So those rash judgments nearly sank the company. Conviction will fuel the boldness, but without collaboration, it becomes recklessness. So then there is the Travis Kalanick at Uber, another very interesting story. His conviction in growth at all cost culture made Uber the giant it is today. But it also created a toxic environment, internal scandals, lack of ethical oversight, and disregard to employees and regulations ultimately forced him out. So conviction without balance turned innovation into toxicity. So as we see these patterns, convictions can or will backfire when it drowns other people's voice, when it builds narrow vision, when it drives rash decisions. It's not conviction that's the problem. It's conviction without humility, without collaboration, without checks and balances, without the guardrails. So we are seeing different factors of conviction. We have seen how conviction can inspire. We have also seen how it can be dangerous when it is left unchecked. And that's why leaders and organizations need safeguard. So let's take a look at some of the effective leaders and how they safeguarded it. When you look at diverse perspectives and constructive dissent, strong leaders encourage it. At Cleveland Clinic, their CEO, Dr. Cosgrove, sought feedback from physicians and patients. When leaders invite diverse perspectives, it prevents the tunnel vision and ensures conviction is tested by reality. Then the honor of governance, the boards, the committees, checks and balances. So in business, think about Johnson & Johnson's board during the Tylenol crisis. When the cyanide-laced capsules caused death in 1982, the leadership immediately worked with regulators and independent experts before making the bold move. The bold move was to pull 31 plus millions of bottles from the shelf. So the governance structure gave them the courage to act transparently and decisively. Align with organizational mission and values consistently. That's the third one. Conviction without alignment will create chaos. In healthcare, Mayo Clinic is a model here. Their mission, the need of the patient comes first. It's so clear that leaders' convictions are always measured against it. This alignment keeps conviction from becoming ego-driven. Fourth one, promote psychological safety so concerns can be raised. Remember the NASA Challenger disaster. Engineers had already raised concerns about the O-ring, but there wasn't a culture of psychological safety to speak up against the launch pressures. Conviction in the mission was to move forward, overshadowed the caution. The culture needs to be built where people feel safe to speak up, which could have prevented that tragedy. Last one, balance personal conviction with humility and data. Conviction should always be balanced with evidence. So during COVID-19, the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, demonstrated this very well. She acted with conviction in protecting the lives, but always communicated decisions with humility and backed them with data. Remember, those times, data was very limited, but she still used that data. That combination built public trust and global recognition. So the Tylenol case maybe is a gold standard. Leadership conviction, putting patient safety above the profit and the business was always balanced with accountability, governance, and transparency. That safeguard not only saved the brand, but strengthened the public trust for decades. So it became a textbook case study. So safeguards doesn't weak conviction, they protect it. They make sure a leader's passion doesn't turn into stubbornness and that organizational integrity is preserved. So we discussed the conviction without oversight can be dangerous. And that's why compliance and governance are so important. They serve as a safety rails for conviction-driven leadership. So the chief compliance officer ensures alignment. So every innovation that we come in healthcare has to be compliant. The innovation, the startup that some of us brought to the table, we discussed between the physician instructions and patient safety. We went through extreme compliance. We want to make sure that it passes the institutional review board. It is completely compliant, follows all of the compliance and regulations. In healthcare, especially billing, patient safety, privacy practices, they have to align laws like HIPAA, and compliance play a very, very key role. Upholding organizational values and code of conduct. So compliance is not just about laws, right? We saw Cleveland Clinic, the compliance leaders consistently reinforce that every decision must reflect the mission, putting patients first. They remind leadership that conviction must be measured against the organization's stated purpose. Independent voice to challenge questionable directives. So this role is most critical when the leader's conviction goes unchecked. Let's take the Boeing 737 MAX crisis. Engineers raised safety concerns, but compliance and oversight didn't have the independence or power to stop leadership from pushing planes into the market quickly. This lack of a strong independent voice cost life, damaged the trust. So oversight could have forced leaders to slow down, grounded the leaders, and listened to act safely. Hope Boeing will take these lessons very carefully and build a culture where psychological safety exists at the grassroots level. So safeguard without undermining leadership authority, right? So a solid compliance shouldn't paralyze leadership, shouldn't paralyze innovation, shouldn't paralyze growth, etc. It should strengthen it. Think about the FDA's oversight for drug development. Leaders in pharma may have conviction that a new therapy will save lives, save human lives. But compliance ensures rigorous testing and safety before patients are exposed. So those safeguards preserve the trust in medicine without undermining the innovation. So the Boeing crisis is a sobering reminder. Conviction and speed to market was strong, but without compliance oversight, it becomes dangerous. In contrast, organizations where compliance is empowered, like Mayo Clinic or Johnson and Johnson, it shows that conviction plus oversight equals safety, trust, and long-term success. So now let's take a look at how can we lead effectively with conviction. Definitely, we need to find role models who balance conviction and humility. Leadership is learned as much as it is lived. So in healthcare, we discussed Dr. Farmer, who co-founded Partners in Health. He modeled conviction in delivering healthcare for the poor, but always with humility. He worked side by side with patients in rural Haiti, showing that conviction doesn't mean being above others. It means serving alongside them. Number two, broaden horizons. We looked at several examples where you need to seek diverse experiences to refine your perspectives. The story that comes to my mind now is Indra Nui, the former CEO of PepsiCo. She broadened her perspective by working across multiple industries and cultures. I read in her book that she will be driving with the drivers, visiting the stores, working in the factory, understanding the packaging and the delivery and the supply chain. Her diversity of experience helped her lead PepsiCo. And her conviction was performance with purpose, balancing the profitability with healthier products and sustainability. So leaders refine the conviction when they see the world through many different lenses. Also important is continuous self-awareness, developing the habit of questioning our own assumptions. Effective conviction is not blind faith. It's conviction or building the conviction that questions itself. So Mayo Clinic's leadership has long modeled this through constant peer review and reflection. They have convictions in patients first, but leaders continuously ask, are we living up to that mission? Self-awareness keeps conviction grounded and credible. Last but not least is focus on the common good. Always prioritize organizational mission over any personal gain. Paul Pullman at Unilever is a great example. He ended quarterly earnings to Wall Street because his conviction was in long-term sustainability, not short-term profit. So Wall Street mandates everybody for reporting the quarterly profit. This decision was tough for Unilever. It is unpopular with investors, but it reshaped Unilever's purpose and positioned it as a leader in ethical business. This is something which was very hard for me to understand. In one of my previous jobs, even though our business has exceeded the expectation, on what we have laid out. Unfortunately, it didn't match the earnings expected by Wall Street, and we had to undergo um, layoffs so that we can show the profit margin, sacrificing employees and showing the profit and sustaining the shareholders' gains. It bothered me so much, and it didn't take me too long to leave that company and to join another one because it didn't sit with my conviction of taking care of your own people, irrespective of what happens from a business front. So leading effectively with conviction isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about pairing your passion with humility, broadening perspective, and staying self-aware and putting the common good over personal gains. And that's the kind of conviction that would transform organizations and inspires trust. So as we wrap up this discussion on conviction, what are some of the core lessons? First, conviction is essential, but unchecked will lead to a dangerous pathway. We looked at Nelson Mandela's conviction built a nation, but somebody else like Jim Jones, who rallied people for a short time, his conviction destroyed large communities. So the same fire that inspires can also consume us. So second, highly effective leaders balance passion with accountability. We looked at Satya Nadella, how he paired his conviction, how he brought in innovation with empathy and the culture change. We looked at Starbucks, where the conviction of caring for the employee, but always checked with that financial realities. When all of those happens, passion becomes sustainable and paired with accountability. Third, systems, culture, and compliance prevent conviction from becoming misuse of authority. We looked at the Tylenol crisis and how Johnson & Johnson acted based on the compliance department, how the Boeing crisis showed the lack of compliance oversight, or how compliance was not given a paradigm of psychological safety for them to speak up. The fourth one is true conviction inspires trust, alignment, and sustainable success. So when people see that a leader's conviction is grounded in values, balanced with humility, and supported by evidence, they align behind it. And that's why conviction is not just powerful, but it lasts over time. So finally, think about the contrast. Leaders like Mandela and Nadella shows how convictions paired with balance, how it can transform organizations and societies. Many of the business leaders reminds us of the risk when conviction blinds leaders to truth or ignores the accountability. So the big takeaway from all this discussion is conviction is the energy of leadership, but it only works when it is anchored in values, balanced with humility, and safeguarded by accountability. That's the difference between conviction that inspires change and convictions that can cause harm. Thank you, everybody, for this lecture, and looking forward for the competency number 2.